Our next speaker, Neal Henderson, is a former pro triathlete and still an active athlete, but most of all, he's a coach. He's been accompanying athletes of all levels, first-time finishers, world champions, and Olympians. In this lecture, he will tell us about integrating IMU movement and cycling performance data to coach athletes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to Daniel and the team here for inviting me and for putting on a great conference. I've been really enjoying it myself. So to start off, what an IMU is: an inertial measurement unit. This is a triaxial accelerometer that also has a gyro in it. That's really the thing we're going to talk about, but it's going to take me a while to get there. First, a little bit about me, blah, blah, blah. I like cycling and triathlon especially. I am going to do a little dog and pony show, so here are my dogs. And what do you call a pony with a sore throat? A little horse. Anybody else need a dad joke when they go home? I'm a dad, so it's always good to have dad jokes when I return. One more? Why can't a bicycle stand up by itself? Notice there's a stand. Because it's too tired. Alright. Into the good stuff, dog and pony shows. My background is in really kind of the high performance realm over the past several years, focusing on that elite level cyclist and triathlete, though my body of work as a coach really is from that age group, an amateur population, all the way up to that. How I got into things, I'm going to talk a little bit about my approach in taking some of the laboratory back out into the field. So I got involved in sport as an athlete myself, and really was interested in things and wanted to go into the lab to study it more. And now that I've spent, decades doing some of the lab stuff, I want to get back out into the field and be able to still gather some of that information. And so I'm going to show through some data integration projects that I've worked with, and then specifically into the IMU units that the LEOMO have developed and what we've been doing with them in cycling. So I've been involved in sport for a while, and a couple of years ago I was trying to figure out how do I convey the way I approach high performance and algorithm, whatever. It's a process or set of rules to follow. And here's kind of the way I look at it. Training balanced with rest, which is modified by your genetics, will yield some capacity to perform. So some people have great genetics. If you choose your parents properly, wonderful. You get to go to the Olympics. Taylor Finney, who I coached for a number of years, chose 2 Olympic medalist parents. That was a good start in cycling, and he didn't start racing bikes until he was 15 and had rapid success at competing at his first Olympic Games at age 18. Stupid. But predominantly genetics, for sure. Hopefully I didn't hurt him along the way to getting there, but that capacity to perform, even if we do proper training and we have whatever genetics we have a capacity to perform, but we don't actually get a reward or a place in a race based on what was possible. We have to actually execute. And even if we execute our best race, somebody else may employ tactics that take away what we were capable of doing, and it doesn't end well. So as much as we try to control a lot of these factors, there's still aspects that are uncontrolled in sport, and that's both absolutely maddening at times and why it's so extraordinary when you have an athlete who achieves that success at those higher stages. And that's kind of like an addictive thing for a coach who likes that pressure and expectation, even though you may go bald early and turn gray. It's worth that stress for me to think about it. When I coach athletes, this is kind of a process that I think about in trying to develop that capacity to perform. That first we want to initiate proper movements with proper mechanics. We have to develop those neuromuscular patterns. Then the second part is recruiting at a maximal velocity, and then at a maximal force, and then the product of those two things at a maximum power. We then go into being able to sustain a given output for longer periods of time relative to what an athlete is preparing to do. So an Ironman athlete No, they don't have to do a lot of 100-meter sprints, though I do want to work on their mechanics at a high speed initially to make sure that they have good mechanics and know that, again, if they came side to side with somebody on the finish line at the end of a 8-hour race, that they have a better chance of winning than the other person because they've actually done some high-end neuromuscular work, even if it's just a little. And then the next part is then the ability to repeat that. So, great example, individual pursuit. You have 2 rounds. You have a qualifying round and a finals round, or a team pursuit now, a qualifying round, a semifinal, and a final. And you have to be able to continuously repeat that high level of performance. And as Phil showed yesterday with British cycling being able to break the world record and then break the world again a couple hours later. That's a task, and the ability to repeat is critical, not one-time only. So getting back into this capacity to perform, it is this integration of not just physiological, but nutritional preparation, psychological, biomechanical. All of these things are absolutely critical parts of that. And when we get into the biomechanical, often I look at how we move and consider really quality of movement as being very important. Not just the ability to do a movement, but how well you are doing it. When you see a well-trained cyclist who maybe has a track cycling background, and you see them riding just smooth, souplesse, those kind of terms, is just that high quality of movement, good integration, good neuromuscular control, etc. We have different tools available to be able to analyze motion. We can use visual means, we have video, we have now 3D and motion capture systems that have gotten more attainable. When I first got into the field, I worked in the sports science realm. I was the director of the sports science department at Boulder Center for Sports Medicine for 12 years, and we had a peak modus system, and that was where Andy Pruitt was doing his work, and so that 3D system was unobtainium for most places outside of a university setting. And so it's amazing to see in a short period of time having some sort of that kind of information be coming from even these now basically wearable sensors to a degree. It's not the exact same, but we're getting very similar information and data regarding that. So we can evaluate technique, we can see what's going on with weakness, changes in range of motion, structural deficits, asymmetries, etc. And I'm not saying that asymmetry is always bad, but how is somebody compensating for that? And so putting all these things together kind of, for me, starts way back. I was a track and field athlete as a youngster, and I had a very good discus and throwing coach. I started off throwing discus and javelin, and I haven't thrown in 20-some years, but my 12-year-old daughter was doing track and field this spring, and she asked me to teach her how to throw the discus, and I just grabbed a little 2-pound weight in the backyard and had her video me, and then showed that with her and went through some of the movements and techniques and that motion of how to do it properly. And she had a massive improvement, overnight, and being able to actually throw the discus properly and release with the thumb and have it rotating in the proper direction, not going out the back like most people think the discus goes, etc. And some of those same techniques I used to teach myself to pole vault. We didn't have a pole vault coach, but I was totally wanted to do it. And so I watched people do it. I watched videos repeatedly of people doing it, and then I went out there and big breath, run down, and it worked out, and had some success doing that. But I was always interested in looking at motion and trying to get what I could without all the resources that were potentially available to some others. And so out of that self-coaching and then being able to help other guys. So we had multiple other guys then that started for Multimember School because we figured it out, some of the things that you wanted to do, and things you didn't want to do. One of the projects I was involved with in 2003 at Boulder Center for Sports Medicine was Andy Pro was working with Specialized, and they were trying to do some work with saddles, and we had a foot pressure measurement system actually for our running gait and walking gait lab. And I got to thinking, well, we could actually look at initial tuberosity distance with that pressure, not just having them sitting on a hard surface. And we wrote up a little proposal and had 20 men, 20 women to start. We have them at 90 degrees, 60 degrees, and 45 degrees of flexion, measuring those isotuberosity distance. And that's really kind of what started the ball rolling towards when they offered the 3-7. 130, 143, 155 came from some of that. They did much more research after, but this was kind of the starting things. And for me, it's about using different tools to help your clients to learn some information. So don't be afraid to go off-label with something, you know. I mean, we do that a lot of times in bike fitting, right? A level from the hardware store is meant to not look at motion and tracking, but it's a wonderful tool to use. So don't be afraid to think outside of the box and use different tools in different ways. Another big project that I was involved with from 2010 through 2012 was with the Specialized Performance Project, and they had a fit process that Andy had helped develop, and I did a lot with the physiological evaluations, and a little bit more, you know, kind of simplistic stuff that we could actually do on the road easily with lactate profiling, and then power testing out in the field with power meters, and then going to the velodrome and actually using some of Jim's work to be able to back calculate that CDA, or coefficient of drag area. And also then they brought in an F1 engineer, because the process as I was doing it took, say, 15 minutes a run to get some CDA value. They decided to bring in the high-power F1 engineers and get the data real-time, as well as then look at sensors within tilt of the bike when we're riding on the road, and what the lean angles were, and differences from one rider to another on a given TT course, how they were taking the corners, as well as then what's happening with torso angle as they're riding. And so we've been looking at different things and trying to integrate these systems and cross over from one kind of area to another and work together as a team to help our athletes. And that's something that is really exciting. Had a really cool experience being able to work with Tom Bonin in 2011. Tom had won all those Paris-Roubaix up to that point on his standard Ambrosia Tide soldered wheels, and the new team was sponsored by SRAM. They wanted him on the zip wheels. And so we had to actually go to show what the aerodynamic difference was in terms of the power output, even on a 303 versus the Ambrosia, and just show them, you know, what was going on so that it was an informed decision, and, you know, have them be comfortable with those decisions. Interestingly, yes, we saw the differences in wheels, and he's like, oh, that's very good, and we also showed him a couple other things, but here's something that we weren't expecting. Handlebar. He came in with, it's either 46 or 48 wide. And again, he's a big unit, absolutely, no doubt. But he was driving the bus, and part of that process was like, let's just look at the aerodynamic effect of coming to a 44. And again, there was cost savings, and he's like, oh, it feels fine. Great. We were able to gather some information. And the other thing I did, I was like, you know how some guys ride on the tops, kind of like those aero bars that aren't there. Just see what that looks like for you on the track. Whoa, that was massive. You know, it was 60, 80 watts for him at, say, 50K an hour. The funny thing is, he said, well, Paris-Roubaix is not one of the tops to win it on the road. The sector after, you typically. And you see 2012 Paris-Roubaix, take a look at some of the video shots. You'll see him in his imaginary aero bars as he goes solo on the road section. So don't be afraid to see something that you weren't actually looking for. Keep your eyes open. I coached again with the track, and we had Taylor at the Olympics in 2008. They took out the individual pursuit. I still was really interested in that track, so women's team pursuit was entering the Olympic program in 2012, and so I was able to continue to work on the track and help our women's team pursuit. We did have a small bit of men's team pursuit going on, and it looked a little something like this. Taylor Finney, Daniel Holloway, Eastman, and then Lawson Craddock. Here, Lawson was 16 years old, I believe, maybe 17. Taylor is 19 years old. And this is an atypical team pursuit, but what we were doing here was integrating the data from the SRM power meter with Dartfish and being able to overlay. This is only Taylor's power data because he's actually the only one who had a power meter, and I really did not have the skills and ability to do more than one power meter in 2010 to integrate with the video. But But notice Taylor's still on the front. And Taylor's going to stay on the front, and stay on the front. And comparatively, we did not have a team of similar capable riders, so this was just kind of a training, fun thing for Taylor to be able to do some individual pursuit work with, a little bit of rest intervals as the other guys would take, half lap pulls. And so, atypical 4K, but it kept it fun for him, because doing 4Ks by yourself over a few years is a little challenging mentally. So we made it a little more interesting. So if somebody, I think Daniel took a 1 lap pool, that was his only 1 lap pool. From there, everyone takes half lap pools. Eastman, and then that's going to be a half lapper out of there. And here's Lawson Craddock again, pretty solid rider himself, but half lap pool. Get the heck out of the way. Taylor's going to go back on the front for a few more laps. Yada, yada, yada. So you see the kind of power output that's going on there. Here, a couple years later, I've advanced. I now have the data of 3 riders, Sarah Hammer, Lawrence Maya, Jenny Reed. I have cadence, power, and speed. Again, not a very high resolution video, but over the period of time that we're working, we're just getting a little bit more information. And this was done a little bit for us, but it was also done to be able to show the athletes after and give them some data and feedback that was more interesting than a cut and dry black and white. Unfortunately, it took several hours to process these videos. If you ever worked with Dartfish back many years ago, we're working with data and video, you understand how big of a headache that was to get that kind of information. But providing that information and feedback to athletes is really important. In the 2012 Olympic Games, which was the first women's team pursuit, it was 3K, 3 women start, 3 finish, so it was a little bit different then. The margin that we had over our semifinal ride versus Australia, I say somewhat sorry, Australia, but not terribly sorry, was as follows. We knew they would take it out faster than us. They were younger, they had speed, they were going to go out hot. We thought that at the halfway point, if we were no more than 1.5 seconds behind them, we had a chance. We get to the 1.5 and they're 1.66 seconds. I'm honestly, that's not awesome. Next lap they come by and my heart sank. It was like, that's it, 1.7, it's going out. And then it starts to come back. It starts to come back. I start yelling. I don't stop yelling. I lose my voice as we beat them by that smallest margin, 0.08 seconds, which advanced us to the gold medal round final versus GD, which on home soil they trounced us. But we got to the silver medal round, and our team earned a silver medal. It was a very small margin. Going into our next cycle, going into Rio, we do stuff in the lab, but it was still not always as interesting for the riders, so I use some of the technology that I use with my amateur riders in an indoor cycling studio setup using the Perf Pro software that's set up for, like, say, Wahoo kickers or whatever else, smart trainers, and being able to have everyone see their data as they're going along and doing a training session. And I thought, well, I think I could adapt that and basically put speed sensors and pair the power meters to a little amp bridge and create a little network and have that information sent to me real time here. And in fact, we got that set up so that the riders, as they're doing these interval sessions on the one bike, had a little something else to watch. But the big picture was I wanted to be able to put this on the track bikes and also be able to see it as well while they're doing training. But we still had some other things going on. We had all the download, we had all this data that we had to process after a ride on the track. Even if we could see it real time, we couldn't provide feedback that was useful for the riders quickly from that, because I could see it and then I have to download everything, process it, etc., and do my other tasks. Again, USA Cycling, especially back then, we had a much smaller budget, let's just say, than any other country that we were competing against. Britain probably outspending us 10 to 1, maybe 20 to 1, even Canada 2 to 1. So I was doing a few different jobs at once, but I was able to actually get some of that information on the track, but it came at a cost. Really, the integration that we wanted to achieve was having our power output data, and we look at the pull power on the front and when the rider is sitting on the wheel, because you cannot spend energy on the front that you haven't saved when you're on the wheel. So we wanted to look at that and be able to track each athlete every single session. That is of high importance, and especially every race. So we have all that data. We have Jim and the aerodynamics model going back and being able to look at the power required to build a given speed with the CDA that we had measured from that rider both in the wind tunnel and then validated on the track. We also have an electronic timing coming from our velodrome in LA. We wanted to look at some other new things, muscle oxygen here, and then we have, of course, all our SRM data and also some video so that we can provide some feedback. The process to be getting useful data to the athletes was taking about 4 hours. So we'd finish a training session at 8 o'clock at night, I'd have dinner and start processing, and at 1 or 2 in the morning I had something useful, I'd send it to the coach. 8 in the morning the next training day, he just didn't even look at it, and they go to the next training. And so after a few months of me doing this, very, losing a lot of sleep, I was like, this is not awesome. Talked to some folks at EOSOC who paired us up with some folks from IBM, very smart. They were able to take this process from 4 hours to a tenth of a second. It was pretty helpful for me. They came into my office and said, well, in a perfect world, what would you want? And I was like, I'm just running through all the things, and they're like, and what else? And an hour later, and then what else? And I was just like, this is weird. This is like the best Santa Christmas gift wish list that a sports scientist could ever ask for. And it was cool. And so, I'm drawing things out, they're taking their notes, and in 8 weeks I had a working app, real-time data. And full analysis. So the solution was basically using an Android device as a bridge, sending that up to the cloud, using all their technology, putting on all their definitions, being able to get that data coming back real time, as well as then into a repository of data and cloud-based so that we could go back and look and track performance. This is kind of a model of what that looked like in combining video data, and then we have power output, and again, may not only real data, but lap times. We have the power we know is required in this dash line to go a given speed based on the rider's CDA and the environmental conditions, temperature, pressure, saturation, etc. And then we have each rider's power output. We fed into it a W prime anaerobic capacity model so we could see if an athlete was expending energy when they're not on the front, and how deep they're dipping into those reserves, because if they empty the tank before the end of 4K, well, that's going to impact the team. Now, occasionally we may have a given athlete use up all that energy early and get out of the way so the other 3 can then finish. You got to look at what you've got, but it was a pretty massive jump for us to get something like that. And so I'm not going to go into detail with all that information, but the coolest part is we were able to provide that feedback loop to the athletes more rapidly, and we won our first ever Team Pursuit World Championship title in 2016, which was sweet because we did it in London. We beat the Brits in London. That was absolutely massive. But the buggers came back and got us in Rio, and we had to settle for silver again. So, pluses and minuses, that's how the sport works. So those margins just can be very small. The crazy thing is the progression. After 2012, they moved to a 4K distance. The sport went from a 4:32 to a 4:13 world record in 2 years. And then even in that Rio round, we set a world record in beating Australia again to move into the gold medal final. GB beat our world record by a tenth of a second, just to kind of let us know, hey, we're here for the party. So I think most of you have seen this, but it's really about taking sometimes that data and transforming it so that you can inform it. And sometimes even those of us who have information have to translate that to whom we're working with. So you may have a client that can't get this side of things. You need to boil it down to the level where they understand it, meet them where they're at. And that was a lot of what we were doing with our athletes. And then they can integrate it and change the performance. So after that experience, I got pretty jacked on this real-time feedback and data coming in. And so as a sports scientist, I mean, this is my bag. This is stuff that's in my bag. When I'm traveling, I'm going to be going and visiting a client after this. So I've got my lactate analyzer, I've got my muscle oxygen sensors, I've got my LEOMO IMU, I have an aerodynamics measuring unit here with some Garmin IQ apps for the different epoxy and aero stuff, and of course all the baseline aero things and whatnot. So I can do a lot of information in a pretty small package now. What normally would have been, massive scale is now something in a backpack I can carry on and go do a lot of the work necessary to help someone. So for those of you who here has been through, or who hasn't yet been to the LEOMO and saddle pressure workshop yet. So for those of you who haven't seen it, this is some of the data that we get real time, looking at the Type R head unit. So effectively there are 5 of these IMUs placed, typically thigh, foot, and then pelvis. You can substitute, take one of the 5 ones off and exchange it and put it up on the torso. So when we're doing TT work, definitely it's often better to get them that torso in addition rather than the 2 thighs. But you have options, and you can also change them what's being viewed on that. When an athlete uses this, the head unit itself has GPS, it pairs to your power meter, it has all of those things. Uploading that to the LEOMO dashboard, you have all your typical standard cycling metrics at the top. So you have your distance of the ride, the duration, ascent, TSS, all those kind of things, average power, cadence, speed. If you have left-right power, what that averages are, and then here's the map from the GPS. Moving down from there, we get into then the versus either duration or distance, and you have then all the cycling data, heart rate, power, speed, cadence. In addition to then, this is the overlaid MPIs, or motion performance indicators. So that's going to have leg range of motion, LAR, leg angular range, foot angular range, FAR, and then DSS is dead spot score. That's going to be, I'll show in more detail here, but that's basically accelerations and decelerations of the foot during the pedal stroke, how smooth it is. And then we also have the pelvic angle, rotation, and rock of the pelvis, all from those sensors. It's potent. Here is blowing up the dead spot score and the pedal stroke intelligence. This is a left leg, left foot, right foot. And what this is, as we go from the inside, this is lower power going out to higher power bands here. And each of those dots represents where those dead spots are occurring in the pedal stroke. Again, left versus right. And then the color is how frequently then those dead spots are occurring in that. And so, relative to the cadence here. So you can select at low cadence only what do those dead spots look like, or at higher cadence, and here are your selections for that. And then also you can change that power range. So it tells how that is moving, and then we have information here to be able to look at what's happening across these other measures. And I know it's a ton of information, and it takes a little while to digest. So I'm going to try to stick to some of the ones that are a little easier. I can go in more depth, but for right now, I'm going to stick to a couple of the ones that we can see and actually are fairly supportive of what we've seen from both Wendy and Dr. Martens' work in terms of some of the changes with dorsiflexion, pelvic angle with fatigue, and then also in time trial and power output. Again, we can look at some of those things, the leg, angular range, pelvic angle here at, again, this is cadence, and then this is power output. So higher power output, and then increasing cadence. And you can see are there trends and tendencies of moving that angle from one place to another, one degree of angulation to another. And then we also have the pelvic rock and rotation similar. Again, that's the extra next level stuff. I know this looks like a ton of data, but we're gonna, again, focus on a few things. This is actually going on a ride averages of leg angular range, left and right. Average pelvic angle for the entire ride, 46.3 degrees. Pelvic rotation, average 8.6 degrees, and average rock 5.7. And then we can go into, these are then different intervals. So during this interval, the average pelvic angle 47.6 degrees. There's recovery, and then another interval, recovery, another interval. But being able to look and see trends over time, you can mark those intervals while riding, just a lap button, or afterwards in the software, you can select that, rename it, hide the others, etc. I've worked with a lot of different athletes, a paracyclist here, Jamie Whitmore. She was actually an able-bodied Xterra triathlon world champion, and that's when I was working with her initially. And she actually had a cancer diagnosis and a nerve cell sheath tumor that was around her sciatic nerve. And so she had some pretty significant procedures, taking out her sciatic nerve and her entire glute muscle, which changed what she could do. There's no ankle control after that. So she has a brace here, but has come back to sport and come up to the highest levels with Paralympic gold and silver medals in Rio in 2016. This is her riding on the track, doing a standing start, and this video, it's not looking so good. Sorry about that. Can't really see it there, but there's definitely some asymmetry, as you would imagine. But interestingly, I was able to go out on a road ride with her, put the LEOMO on, and just go look at what's going on, and look at her foot range and leg range. Pelvic angle, this is an early ride with this system for me. But the adaptations that have been made for her in her position yield a pretty small difference effectively in her foot range and leg range. There's less dynamic movement, but there still is movement of that ankle angle. So it's not the exact degrees, it's the range of motion that the ankle is going through. So there is still change even if the ankle is at 90 degrees. The foot, that foot angle is still changing during the pedal stroke. Nobody is maintaining a 90-degree flat all the time. So still change even with a locked ankle. But from this we were able to kind of see what was going on, and interestingly, very little decelerations left and right, very smooth. A lot of times, again, as an approach, I want to make changes, purposefully perturb something. So like Dr. Martin, going to extremes on crank length, going to extremes in different situations, and then look at that response, because we don't know what we don't know. There's a new system that I've been looking at, a metabolic system, that we can go out in the field and gather all this information. It's pretty awesome. Here's our typical setup in the lab and doing, a VO2 max test. And I started off with the LEOMO and some of my things, looking at things I did know, lab test, and max aerobic power, and its standard ramp 1-minute protocol to absolute failure, and look at the motion associated with that. And I do practice what I preach, so you can see me suffering in the end stages of VO2 max test here. I'm not terribly stable, especially on that left leg. Absolutely at the limit, and so it's good to go to those extreme physical limits to see what's happening with motion. And again, we have all of our data, but here's our foot angular range. So this is during a threshold portion of tests, or longer 3 or 4 minute stages. Right over here is that ramping VO2 max portion. Even if I don't look at the numbers, we see a trend of an increase in foot angular range of motion. That follows Wendy's work, correct? Yesterday? Cool. What about pelvic angle? Oh, here we are during that max. Decrease in pelvic angle. Oh my gosh, this is happening in the real world. Well, it's in a lab, but still, it's kind of the real world. We're seeing a lot of the same things that the science is out there. And the interesting thing is, every person's response may be a little bit different, the degree to which some of these changes occur, and there may be some expected typical norms, but every time you have an expectation of seeing the same thing, occasionally you're going to get blindsided by the one that doesn't fit the model. And then what is going on, and that's your skill in being able to look and use your different tools and figure out what's going on to help them. Zooming in on that, so again, we see that foot angular range here, and at the very end, one foot is very much more engaged and doing a lot more. And here's the pelvic. It's more stable overall, and then towards the end, getting that, you know, the Humpty dance, I call it, at the end of the VO2 max test, doing everything possible to try to keep those pedals moving over, rocking back and forth as well as after coming forward. We took a few different riders and just put the same LEOMO unit and consecutively had them do 1 minute ramp protocols, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, you know, 1 minute ramp to their max, and then switched over to the next rider, put them on, and this was indoors on a walking kicker, on their own bikes, and just looking at these different values. Again, this is rider 1, rider 2, rider 3, rider 4. If you look at something like dead spot score, you see clearly different dead spots in this rider versus this rider versus this rider versus this rider, right? You can see that visually. Again, even if we don't go to the numbers, there's a lot more going on number 3, especially compared to, we'll say, rider number 2 here. We also see then greater differences here in foot range in the first quarter for this athlete compared to their overall foot range, but they also have significant leg range differences throughout. This one's pretty symmetrical, a little bit more variation here. And so you can look at these different trends, even comparing person to person to person. That's what I was trying to do here, trying to get a handle on what does this data mean? What are we seeing? And I wanted to get a number of people back to back to back doing the same task, so that I could start to see what I saw with my eye, as well as what the data was showing. And so, first guy, cyclocross rider. Notice he's got a much more dead spot here early. As he's working harder, he gets smoother on that pedal stroke. Okay, that's interesting. But why does he have so much dead spot early on? You know, there's different things, but everyone says cyclocross makes you a smoother rider, right? Maybe not necessarily in terms of a pedal stroke smoothness like that. But a skilled rider, absolutely yes, there's still values. Getting into our second one, this one was the rock steady. Right here, PSS, low pelvic angle, her rock and rotation minimum. Interestingly, her background, she was a downhill skier in Vail for the first part of her life through teenage years, and then started racing bikes. So if you know downhill skiers, they're pretty typically strong lower body and through that core to be able to control that speed when they're going 60, 100K an hour, 80, 90, 100K an hour. And that translates to how she rides a bike and how she can sit and lock in and stay stable on a bike. This guy with the noisiest dead spot is actually the most accomplished athlete of the group. He's most recently a top 25 World Cup cyclocross finishes. And here's where his dead spots are, all the way out, after 6 o'clock and on both sides, with a little bit later on the right side than left side. But otherwise, on the pelvic, not a lot of variation throughout. The key here is looking at each individual, what they're doing and what's going on. This one was fun in seeing a few different things. There's, again, some differences, asymmetries we'll say, but for me, the pelvic angle, seeing these little dips, what is that? Well, she's moving around on the saddle. She does not like this saddle. And as she's working harder and harder, she likes it less and less and less. And it may not just be the saddle, maybe where the saddle is, but she is clearly not a happy rider. And so after, again, she had never complained of issues, but seeing this, it's like, how do you like your saddle? Oh, I hate it. Why didn't you say something? I just get used to it because that's what the team provides us and that's what we get, and I get what I get. It's like, well, no, let's try to figure out something, and she's happier now, per se. But if we had pressure mapping, sure, we would have seen something as well there, but this was a tool, non-invasive, they could go out and ride and we'd see the same thing. Saddle height, again, I like to see some differences, so put everything together here. We have a motion capture system with some force pedal integration and also the LEOMO system, and so, standard saddle height, this is where I like to ride, this is my happy place, and then went and did dropping the saddle by 2 centimeters lower didn't make any other adjustments, just dropped it down 2 centimeters, captured everything, and then went from standard satellite, went up 2 centimeters. So there's our system with force pedal and information there. So we have all the kinematics, and then we also have the LEOMO data. And so some of the things that we see, so this is standard satellite, then minus 2 centimeter data, and then plus 2 centimeter satellite difference. So number one, dead spots were reduced at a lower satellite. They were increased at a higher satellite. If we look at some of the leg and foot ranges, so foot range was minimally different when dropping 2 centimeters. Leg range decreased by about 4 degrees. And then a little bit of a decrease in pelvic rotation. So again, that anterior posterior with that lower satellite. And then going to the plus 2 centimeter satellite, again, much more DSS. Still a minimal change overall in foot range, but an increase then in leg range, increasing by about 2-3 degrees each side, left, right. And then a clear reduction in the pelvic angle. We see from 57.3 in the standard down to 51. Increase in pelvic rotation from 9 to 12.7, and then an increase in pelvic rock as well with that higher saddle position. Okay, that can make sense. And being able to combine the different pieces of information of what's going on was trying to understand what is the LEOMO IMU data showing me. I know the kinematics, I can look at the video, and then I can see here and try to tie together what that is. I still do compete some, and 2017 was a post-Olympic year, and so a lot of times after the Olympics I'm kind of fried, and I like to do something challenging myself, and so I decided to do the Aqua Bike World Championships, which were last August up in Canada. It's a swim and a bike, so triathlon without running. It's the best kind of triathlon for a non-running, that is, I guess. I love it. It's really fun. And so I had a bike that was given to me, and this was actually Abby Stevens' TT bike, which was an extra small. And she gave it to me, and I was like, okay, I'll just, I'll ride that thing around, fine. And one of the preparation races I did was a 3-day stage race. It had a climb trial, so it was a time trial with climbing. It was an out and back section and then an actual climb. And then second day was just a straight up flattish time trial. And then the last day was a road race. I only captured data for the first hour and changed because I forgot to charge the unit overnight, my bad. So I didn't have all the data, but I do have the first hour because I attacked initially. I was in second place overall, and I dropped the hammer at the beginning of the first climb because I wanted to see if they let me go. They didn't. They caught me, and I still finished second, which was fun. But the biggest thing was looking at then what was going on. So this climb trial, notice starting elevation. Again, I live in the mountains. Starting elevation was 2,500 meters, and it climbed 337 meters. The time trial was down in the lowlands at 1,500 meter starting elevation and ending, and the road race started at 1,600 meter elevation. Looking at the power output, up at this high elevation, I averaged 274 watts in the climb trial. I only averaged 247 watts on the time trial on Eddie's bike, extra small. And in the road race, I, even in the first hour and 9 minutes, averaged more than I did in the time trial with a much lower heart rate. So I looked at that, I was like, okay, something is not like the others, right? The power output during the time trial was extremely out of line with, relatively speaking, what I was capable of doing, both on the other bike, and this was an aero road bike, flip-on TT, full aero TT bike, that was too small, and the road bike. I wanted to go a little deeper and try to then look at all the data from the LEOMO, and I'll spare you the trauma of looking at absolutely everything. I only want you to look at average pelvic tilt, which is now called pelvic angle, 50 degrees on average for the climb trial, 36.1 for the time trial on the extra small bike, and 54.6 degrees average pelvic angle during the road race. You notice the one thing that's clearly different? We call it pelvic angle or hip angle, as Jim was just talking about. And I did see more than a 5% reduction in power. Over 10% at least. So we look at that climb trial a little bit more in detail. It started down low, we went, actually it started, let's see, somewhere down here. We went up to this little town, down, and then this was a climb up to the lake. So here's the elevation profile, slight uphill, slight downhill on in the aero bars in these sections, up and down, and then a climb. Here's the outbound, coming downhill, and then the full climb. So pelvic angle in the arrow position versus climbing. Clear differences. So for the uphill portion, pelvic angle 42.7, on the way back 39.1. There was about a 2% grade on the road out and back, so actually there's even less pelvic angle because that pelvic angle is actually from the horizon, not from the road, from the horizon. And then on the climb, 56.7. We also see then power output differences, 273 going uphill, 235 coming downhill. It was very fast, so actually you want to save a little energy going into the climb, and then 283, so much higher power output while climbing. And you guys know in time trialing, you always put out the most power in the slowest sections. You know what simple harmonic mean is? Do the little math riddle problem. If I have a climb and a descent, if I go uphill at 10 kilometers per hour and downhill at 30 kilometers per hour, what's my average speed? No, it's not 20. You spent more time going 10 kilometers per hour and you spent less time going 30 kilometers per hour. It is less than 20. It is less than the arithmetic mean. It's the simple harmonic mean. So in a time trial, you always want to displace your effort with greater power in the slowest sections, typically uphill and headwind, and less effort on downhills and tailwinds. If you want to go fast. Usually that's our goal in time trialing. Again, I have brilliant ideas sometimes. Usually I succeed 1 out of 20 times. So this was one of those successes. I was like, let's do some changes here. Let's go to a smaller crank. I went extreme, right? From a 172.5 to a 170. And I went up 1 centimeter in the pad height. And I went out and tested on a little out and back section. And lo and behold, pelvic tilt on average 41.4 degrees and 40.5 degrees in my new position, up from the 36 degrees of the terrible time trial. With low power output, it's only averaging at 240 there. During this little test effort, I was able to hold a much higher power output, 288, 296. Yes, shorter efforts, but they confirmed that I could actually do a lot more power in that position, elevating the arm pads, shortening the crank, opening up that hip angle, and actually in the race, when I went for it, I was able to average 40K an hour and hold about 280 watts to have a good day. If I didn't have the LEOMO and those tools, I would not have known how stupid I was in riding Evie's bike without enough stack height and with her crank length, not my crank length. Here's using the tool and looking at coaching and basically time trial posture and torso angles. And so this is a young kid that I coach. He's in Adelaide, and I actually happened to be over in Hobart, and he was coming down for the Oceanic Championships, which was going to be his first ever time trial. And if you recognize the bike, yes, that's a hand-me-down from Ron, which was quite nice of him to outfit this fellow. And one of my coaches was helping me out here in coaching him and showing him what we were seeing. And so, you know, some of you know a little bit about that aerodynamic positioning and some of the things. So there's the shrug of bringing your shoulders in. Look at this kid, the capacity to reduce that frontal area. Shrug, remarkable. Now he weighs all of 54 kilos. He is not a big unit. But still, that's a massive change. Just whoop, cool. And then the turtle, this is his preferred, or again, he never raced a TT, he just got the bike and built it up, and this is what he had. And I was like, okay, let's just go ahead and drop down that chin a little bit so we can smooth out that profile. And so from the front on, the impact of that shrug and turtle, we have a definitely bigger savings overall in aerodynamic drag and frontal area compared to what we had seen if he was just doing it by himself. His head would have been up like that. I call that the periscope up position, and clearly disrupting a whole lot of airflow, slowing him down. And again, he doesn't produce massive pulse because he's not a big unit, so we need to save it. And I was able to use the LEOMO, looking at how he was moving, and especially looking at his torso and what's going on. So we see, again, that difference between lumbar and thoracic, or pelvic and torso here. The pelvic angle on average for him is around 49, 52, and 51 degrees during a few different efforts. and the torso angle 3.6, 3.9, 3.2. So clearly he's still got some stuff going on here that's not necessarily optimal, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and so we're not going to fix this kid overnight and do everything possible. But gave us some clues of things that we can work on with his hamstrings, etc. But the biggest thing is, even though he was doing some pretty intense work here, he was able to maintain torso and pelvic stability to a pretty good degree that we were comfortable with the position. And even with the turbulent shrug, that he was still able to stay stable in the hold that position and produce power. I put together some protocols for LEOMO, and some of them are fairly standard, not too earth-shattering. One of these is just doing a series of power tests in one effort. I like to have our athletes do everything we can in one session. 5-second sprint 2 times, 5-minute maximal effort, 20-minute maximal effort, 1-minute maximal effort. Yes, I mean, it's not nice, it's not fun, but we're trying to gather some information and do it in one session. And I have the LEOMO unit on so I can see how they're moving at those maximal efforts. If we have standing efforts while sprinting, and typically during the 1-minute effort, most people have a good portion of standing, and you can see again how they move while doing those. That's kind of my first thing, and that's also for me as a coach. I know what they're capable of, what kind of animal are they? Are they more slow twitch? Are they better FTP? Do they have a massive sprint? Good anaerobic capacity, or VO2 power, max aerobic power. Second test I will have people do is a simple ramp, like we would do in a lab, but just do it out in the field. 1-minute ramp, start at 50% of FTP, go up 10% of FTP every minute to absolute failure. Again, not fun, but go all the way, let's see what you can do. And then a little recovery, and then go 30 minutes, holding 90% of your FTP from here, which is a 20-minute power after you've done a maximal 5-minute with only a 5 or 8-minute recovery is going to be pretty true, close to maximal sustainable power for, say, about an hour. So we see the ramping changes. We'll see typically that pelvic, and we'll also see dorsiflexion and ankle foot range going during the ramp, and then we can see a 30-minute sustained effort just below threshold, still potentially people breaking down in the movement mechanics because they've also done this preloaded maximal effort prior. Next protocol is specifically looking at high and low cadence. Similar to a lab, if I were doing lactate values, I would typically do something like this, though I wouldn't necessarily change the cadence of these. So I do 2 minutes at 60%, at 50% of FTP at 60 RPM, 2 minutes at 90 to 100 RPM, again, holding that same 50% of FTP, and then go up 10% for the next 2 minutes at low cadence, high cadence, low cadence, high cadence, bring them all the way up to 100% of FTP. If I wanted to do lactates, I could do that at the end of the 4-minute stage. They're doing that same power for 4 minutes, though the first 2 minutes at low cadence, second 2 minutes at a high cadence, so I can do a couple things at once. If I'm in the lab, if they're out on the road, maybe a little bit longer and down a discontinuous protocol and just stop and get the lactate, have them repeat on the hill or something like that. We can do that. But we can see differences in motion. So dead spot score here at the high cadence is lower, and then at the lower cadence, dead spot score is significantly higher. We see some differences going on, especially more in leg range than necessarily foot range. And also seeing some differences in the pelvic rotation here between the high cadence and low cadence. What I'm looking for here is how does this athlete respond to increases both in intensity and that intensity at higher and lower cadences. And then the fourth test is just going more on that high and low cadence, but doing a sustained effort. 15 or so minutes, you can do 20 minutes if you wanted, but 15 minutes sustained at 90% of FTP at a low cadence, and then doing 15 minutes at a high cadence at 90% of FTP. So seeing is there any change in the mechanics over that first few minutes, middle, and later few minutes. So this one, as an example, I look at the first 5 minutes, middle 5 minutes, and then the final 5 minutes, and are there significant changes or trends as they're going along with that? And then same thing on the higher cadence. This one actually we had road construction and had to stop, unfortunately, in the middle of the 15 minutes for a minute for them to let traffic go and then start again. So kind of looking more at the first 3 minutes, middle 3 minutes, and last 3 minutes, and just see that comparison from beginning to middle to end. Interestingly, if we go back and look at the data on this one, I'll want you to look at foot and leg angular ranges here. We're seeing almost a 9 and 8 degree difference on average between foot and leg ranges left and right, with left greater than right. Why? She doesn't have a lot of hip asymmetry. She's not all over the place with pelvic angle. Visually, there was not anything that jumped out extraordinarily. She has a little bit, some dead spot score, but it's less than 10, so it's not, I'm not concerned about those kind of differences. But if I see degree differences of, say, less than 5, 2, 3, 4, bilaterally, I'm not too bound up. But seeing closer to that 8, 9, almost 10 degree difference on both increased on one side and then reduced on the other, it starts to think, well, what's going on? So just, again, looking at things, there was nothing that really jumped out. I said, let's just play around and put you on our fit bike, and let's go ahead and reduce the crank length by 2.5 mil on one side, where there was a increased range of motion, and see what happens. And so created an asymmetric crank and put her on the fit bike, and lo and behold, those differences from 8 and 9%, or 8 or 9 degrees, were down to like 1 or 2 degrees, 3 degrees. She's like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, okay. She's like, I want to try that on my bike. I said, I'm not sure if I'm ready. She's like, no, I want to do it. I was like, okay, because she's like, I have so much low back pain. I get, SI, I get this. She's seen, chiropractor twice a month, massage, twice a month, doing all these things, and especially when she rides her TT bike, she has problems. And again, she's not a very tall rider, and so that hip angle is definitely closed off. And so instead of doing the slightly smaller crank, she got a slightly larger crank. Not effectively the goal, but still the idea was there. And interestingly enough, she rode that around, and we've done some testing, and again, those differences are less. And most importantly, her reported pain, discomfort, etc., after she rides a TT bike is massively reduced. And she says even on the road bike, she feels more square. Where the road bike is still, 170s both sides. She says she still feels more squared on the road bike because she's riding this offset on her TT bike. I don't have the answers. We're going to continue. This is a work in progress. I've probably done about 8 sessions with her, capturing and looking at different things, and it's just going to be a process that we go through over the next month or 2 before we dial in. And she's a very high-performing athlete. She's been top 10 at the U.S. Pro Championships in the time trial the past 3-4 years every year. So again, small bike, and there's that position. And there's a new bit of information new tool that we're seeing here, where we actually have then the video data live with then the MPIs from the LEOMO. So I literally just got that program loaded and running basically in the last week. As you see the date on this, that's the 30th, that's the day before I flew out. So it's new, there is a lot of information. I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone has all the answers on this. I think it's very much open for you to be experimenting, learning, and hopefully we have more information being gathered out there, and people seeing what trends are typical and what things on occasion are atypical. I have one fella, only one, of everyone I've tested, probably 20 some riders, one who has reduced dead spot score at low cadence and increased dead spot score at high cadence. Only one. And that's what it is, and I don't know why yet. And it's different. And it's fun and exciting to try to figure out what's going on. So, that's what I brought for you today. That's my dog and pony show. It's all over. But hit me with your questions. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Any questions? All right.
Thanks, Neal. Are you able to triangulate an angle with the replacements that you use?
Not with the LEOMO system right now. Not an actual positional angle, though. That may be something in the future. But right now, I'm not getting that true knee angle. That's then just using the video of other systems.
All right. the gentleman Ray. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Neil. I've noticed Rowan Dennis has got quite a good position over the few years. I'm sure
Slow Twitch disagrees, but
but I'm sure you've had a hand in that. Was that a big part of your using the technology for his hour record attempt?
yes. So with Rowan, I've been working with him since he turned pro. So whatever, fall of 2012, we started working together. So it's been a working process. He has a lot of experience looking at position from aerodynamics and power production through the AIS system, extensive, in fact, and so much so that I think one of his first teams, they took him to the wind tunnel and they're like, your position's terrible, you have to get lower. He said, please don't do it. And he's like, the CDA is not going to be lower and I can't produce power. And they slam him down, the CDA is higher. Yeah, it's how his body is. Very interesting. Again, the rules are always made to be broken, and clearly the power production is for us an important thing. And then that CDA and refining it is something that we're still looking for gains here and there, and that's why I brought some of the tools along. Gather where he is right now. We know where he's been. Next year we'll be moving on to a new team, and so getting everything matched up is actually why I'm flying down to Spain on Monday here to spend a couple days with him to gather as much information as we can here now on the old equipment before moving to the new team. And there's still, the enemy of good is better, right, or something like that. So we're looking for more continuously. Because power production limitations, there's only so much. So you can't spend what you don't save. And so that's what we're going to try to save a little more, spend not the same. Spend maybe a touch more. Budget is going to increase in terms of power production as we'll make a way of that.
Okay, some more questions?
Yeah, just a question here. Thanks, Neil. My question was in terms of using the LEOMO in a studio fitting type setup as opposed to going out on the road and doing road testing afterward.
Yeah.
Did you find that in a short, say, we've got an hour or 2 hours to do a fit, that you could get benefits from the data it was generating?
Yes.
To help you apply the fit?
In that period of time, especially some of the pelvic angle, that's my go-to. The first thing I'm looking at what's going on again. Once you're getting the satellite set, looking at what's going on with the torso, and especially if you're looking at aero positioning, TT positioning, but even on a road bike, you can see individuals that are well outside of what might be optimal. I've seen a lot of our riders anywhere between 50 and 60 degrees on pelvic angles, kind of that road on the brake hoods sweet spot, and then when they get down into the drops, 45 on the low side, 50, 55 on the high side. And there's just, again, those are the trends, general, we're seeing those things, but the really exciting part is you can, again, do your fit in the lab, in that controlled situation, and send them out into the wild. With that same information being gathered the entire time, they can go do several rides. Is there an accommodation period? Maybe. I don't do a ton of fits myself. I typically outsource a lot of that to different folks, just I have other things that I'm doing at the time. But what might be a really nice model would be doing a fit, having the rider ride in that position. If they need to make tweaks, make them, see them a few days later, a week later, make tweaks, adjustments as needed. If they're happy with that, then get the LEOMO data and gather a week's worth or a weekend's worth of ride data and sit down with them and look at it and see relative to what you saw in the lab what's going on. And to me, that's a big part of it, that you have to have that interaction, again, being able to translate the information that we're gathering to a useful, impactful sharing of that, so the rider knows what was done, what they can do differently. Again, a cue pelvic angle while riding is, again, one of those simple ones. We can set up that screen and just have, power, cadence, heart rate, speed, and pelvic angle only. And just have them concentrate and look at that. Okay, we know that you're producing power, your greatest power when around 42 degrees on that TT bike. Let's try to lock in right around 42 and see what goes on. And then you can say, let's see what happens if you rotate a little more. At 40, what happens? What's the comfort? What's the stress? What if you come back to 44? Again, that may just be choking back. You have to give them that little bit of position coaching. You can do that in the lab, but then also, again, I say, get them out in the real world.
All right, one last question maybe? No? You're all hungry, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, then enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much, Neal.